Now, if you're familiar at all with Cisco's security portfolio, you've probably been paying enough attention to realize that it's grown mostly through acquisitions. We have a number of wonderful security products that were all built by development teams that at the time had never heard of each other. We're working on that. So for the past year or more, we've been building APIs into all of these security products, allowing them to speak to each other, allowing us to write an API integration platform. I hope everybody likes this slide a lot, because it's my only one. Nice. You're going to see a lot of slides today, but they won't be mine. So we have a really technical audience here, and I'm very happy about that, largely because it makes my job easier, because you all are probably going to understand the problem. But we're going to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody working in a security operations center, which many of you have done, I'm sure, who has something that they have to investigate. It could be from any kind of different source. Maybe they got an alert from a vendor, or maybe it's a government alert, something from FSISAC, ITISAC, some organization they might belong to, or it could be an incident that they've discovered in their own network. What are they going to do with this information? Well, they're going to look up some things in threat intelligence, and they're going to look it up probably in more than one source. All these tabs open in the browser. They're going to look in their network telemetry. If this is information coming from an alert, have they seen it in their environment? And of course, there's a number of different places that they are going to have to check, right? There are edge logs, endpoint logs, so on and so on. More tabs open in the browser. And they're going to want to do something about this. They're going to want to enforce some kind of control. So you've got edge devices, endpoint devices, email security gateway, web security proxy, and so on. If you're not already familiar with this problem from having experienced it, it probably makes sense now. All this copying and pasting, one of the things that we joke about in the department is that this is our war on copy and paste. Because this is kind of garbage. So what are we going to do? Cisco Threat Response is an API-driven integration platform. And it's done via modules. So we'll just pretend all of these are modules, not a silly cartoon flower. But we use modules to talk to all these different APIs across the Cisco security portfolio so that you don't have to. So we've got a module for Threat Grid. Label these in blue. I should just spend the rest of my time hiding behind the whiteboard. That was great. Okay. We've got a module for Threat Grid. Threat Grid is our advanced malware analysis platform and malware threat intelligence system. We've got a module for AMP, advanced malware protection for endpoints and various edge devices. We've got a module for the Talos threat intelligence database. We've got a module for the AMP hash reputation database. And we've got modules for various other systems. I'm going to call out one. We have a module for virus total. Now, who can tell me what's different about virus total from the rest of the things that I just listed off? It's sorry?
Google's.
Yeah.
It was acquired by Google.
But because virus total has an open API and is documented, if you have a virus total API key, you can configure a virus total module in Cisco Threat Response and use virus total with this integration platform. So on the other side of this whiteboard, you saw, our security operations center worker has to have all these tabs open and copying and pasting between all of these different things. Here, he gives the information that he's got, maybe an IP address that she saw in an alert, maybe a suspicious looking URL that she found in web proxy logs, and just gives it to Cisco Threat Response. Cisco Threat Response then asks all these different systems via the API so that our SOC worker doesn't have to do that. Now, some of these systems can take certain actions. This is the umbrella module. AMP, you can add a file hash to a block list, and you can do that over the API. So you can do it from threat response. And you don't have to know the hash. It could be something that came back to you in the course of your research. You can add it from there to a block list in AMP for endpoints. You can block domains using the umbrella DNS security system. And that works the same way. If you find a domain in the course of your research and it's something you don't want your network talking to, you can block it right from Cisco Threat Response without having to go over to an umbrella tab in your browser. Did you have a question?
Yeah, there's like, did you just miss the observable and duo tags, I'm hoping, on your list of?
I did not. However, that brings up a good point, which I guess I'll skip to now. This has been in the works for a little while. We just released this a couple of months ago. The first initial beta versions just came out not that long ago, and we opened up to general availability just a few months ago. This is going to be integrated across the Cisco portfolio. So this is what we have now. We've got a couple other things coming in the near future. Email security appliances are going to be integrated. The NGFWs are going to be integrated. But there is not a single Cisco product that is currently like outside of bounds. And we're looking to have this be the integration platform across the entire portfolio. This will never completely replace the UIs for any one product. Have you used FMC? We're not going to build all of that into this. But for the most common responses, for the most common searches, for the quickest things you need to be able to do in an incident response, we want Cisco Threat Response to be the only place you have to go for that immediate reaction.
Sorry.
Okay.
Meraki?
Meraki's on the list.
Okay.
Well, it should be tied through AMP and stuff like that, right?
There's a number of different integrations that are in the works. As far as Cisco Threat Response specifically, Meraki's on the list of things that are going to be looked at in future, but it's not on the immediate development roadmap.
So coming from the network side of things, and this is huge, how is it stability-wise? Because there's been in the past, some new things come out that are really cool, and then they're more frustrating than cool. So how are we doing stability, like code quality, things of?
The back end is really solid.
Okay.
The data handling parts of it are very solid. The UI, as with anything, when you first release it to a large audience, there's been some UI improvements. Let's say that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get up here and tell you that it's 100% perfect when it's a fairly new product, but it works well.
Okay.
So this is Cisco Threat Response. Super exciting, isn't it?
Wow.
Okay, but let me show you an example. Now this is just a list of IOCs. It's just, I mean, it's fairly plain format. It's not CSV or anything. It's something that you might have gotten in an email or anything. You can see that the IP address and the domains are like, defanged so that nobody clicks on them accidentally. Now, normally, when you get an alert like this, you have to go and like pick out the file hashes and pick out the IP addresses, and often you have to take those square brackets out and clean it all up and put it into some kind of CSV format or something so that your other systems can accept it. And that's if you even have systems that are more complicated than Excel and copying and pasting. But we're going to do exactly that. We're going to take the whole thing, we're going to copy it. I'm going to go over here to threat response, and I'm going to paste the whole thing in there just like that. Come on, there. I've done nothing fancy to it. All the comments are still in there, the labels, and I'm going to hit investigate. This is the system speaking through all of those APIs to the systems that are on the other end of those modules, bringing all the information back and presenting it to you in a cohesive, understandable fashion so that you can quickly see what's going on.
It's just regular expression matching, or pretty much?
To pull out those observables, yes.
You normalizing the data as it comes back then and putting it in its own CTR database?
JSON?
Yes. So we're not storing data in the system.
Yeah.
We're reaching out over the APIs to all these different data stores that have either your or global threat intelligence data, and then bringing all that information together. Obviously, we cache it in the back end to show it to you. Mm-hmm. But Threat Response is not a data repository. It's a gateway to other data sources to which you have access.
It's not like a CM approach. You are not concentrating the logs and just discovering.
It's not parsing the logs themselves. It's relying on your other systems to do that. So here we've got There. Right here we have the relations graph portion of the display, probably the most visually interesting, the thing that everyone's eye goes to immediately when they're using this. But you can see that out of all the hashes that we looked up, it looks like all of them except one came back as malicious. So you get this immediate overview of what's going on. You get the icons that show what kind of observable it was, file, IP address, domain, and then from the color coding, you find out what the current threat response verdict is on that item. And these verdicts come from the different systems to which threat response is speaking. So we see here, easycounselor.com is highlighted right now. Here's our list of all of the observables. These are all the judgments that our connected systems have rendered on this item. So Umbrella says that this is malicious. Talos has this listed as suspicious. My other Umbrella module doesn't know whether it's doesn't have a judgment on it. AMP Global Intelligence says that it's malicious several times, and so on. And overall, the system has created a verdict of malicious, and so that's why it shows up as red. Here's the sightings in my environment. A machine of mine has been speaking to this domain over this period of time, and each day to that extent. You can see from the, the line graph of how often it's been contacted.
So right now, we're in a section called Threat Response Investigate. Where's the response part of it? I mean, literally it says Threat Response and Investigate.
I love the way you guys skip ahead. All right, so, well, let's just do that then. So here's a file that we don't know about yet. See these little drop-down looking arrows? There's little V's next to stuff. So this isn't something that was listed in our investigation, all right? This file, if you went and compared this hash, is not in the list that I just pasted. This is something extra that came in as a result of the research that Threat Response did on my behalf. So this is a new piece of information, and it's here because it was seen contacting an IP address that was involved in the attack that I was researching. So let's hit the drop down. There's a number of things that I can do with this, but one of them is under AMP for endpoints. I can add it to a block list right there. I do my investigation. I find out about this other file that maybe I decide I want nothing to do with. I block it at every endpoint that's running AMP for endpoints. And if I've set up the AMP Unity feature, I can also apply that same block to my firewalls, my ESA, my WSA, anything else I have that's AMP enabled. For the domain, I can do the same by simply hitting that same menu bar, and I already blocked it in the previous demo, but I can also unblock it if I want to do that for any reason. So there's the response part. I do my research, and on anything that comes back, or anything that I was researching in the first place, maybe after I get some more information about it, I can take those response actions. Now that's just what we have so far between AMP for endpoints and Umbrella. Those are the response-capable modules that we currently have. But of course, we're going to be integrating NGFW. We'll be able to block IPs. We're going to be integrating ESA, be able to block email addresses and the like. There's a lot more that can be done as we continue to build this solution out across the portfolio.
But again, this is a presentation layer that allows me to, as a human, to look at what's going on and take an action. There's no ML or AI that's going on here that would take an action on its own if I set a policy, let's say.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the data that it's collected and shows in all the little red, how did it actually collect that data? Was it ingested from traffic being access of the internet, files being found, endpoints happen to be doing scans locally, or all of the above, none of the above?
It depends on the module that's doing the reporting. So if it comes back and says, this file was seen in your network, then that's going to be AMP for endpoints that saw the file on one of the endpoints that has a connector running. This example here, this is a machine that reached out to a domain. We know that because of Umbrella. So where the data came from is entirely dependent on the module that reports it, because each module is looking for things in different ways.
And what's the time frame for this investigation? So, for example, someone takes it slow and slow. They go at you a little bit at a time.
That also depends on the module, and there's default windows that each of the different APIs will return data, from.
Okay.
So for I don't remember them off the top of my head, but just for examples, one module might give you data from the previous 90 days. Another module might give you data from the previous 2 weeks. So again, it's module dependent.
But can you then use do you maintain a repository of the information for a long period of time? So we've identified a new threat, a new 0 day, and then we find it's been active in the environment for 240 days or further out at that point.
So AMP for Endpoints is actually really good at that. It has a feature called retrospective security. It's got a black box for a black box recording essentially for every machine that you're running AMP for Endpoints on. And if it sees a file and then sometime afterwards we find out that that file is malicious, it'll actually come back and say, hey, remember that file from back then? Turns out it's bad and we should block it. And it'll do that. It'll do that automatically, but that's an AMP for Endpoints feature.
Can we just step back to the why I would do this? Can you tell me who this is aimed at? This seems like way too big of an ask for even an average sized corporation. Like if I'm paying for AMP for Endpoint or from Umbrella, I expect EasyCounter.com to be blocked out of the box. Like I don't want to do the threat intelligence research that I'm paying for. So what size shops are you looking at doing this level of investigation? Because this is very technical, very direct work that I don't see a system admin at a K-12 school doing.
You're probably right. This is aimed at companies that have a security operations center.
Yeah.
This is aimed at companies, obviously, that have invested pretty broadly in Cisco security tools, because one of the main value props of this is that it allows you to operate all of them at once. So for a small organization that maybe has one security guy part-time in addition to being the IT guy, this is probably not going to be a huge lift because they're not doing this kind of work anyways.
So this is for a SOC
Yes.
install, okay.
Now, to that point, because you mentioned before Total Virus, hey, that's external. Are there other third parties that you would integrate into this thing, indirectly or directly, and either through API or just out the box, like we support these dozen or something?
Yes and no. You like that? Our first priority is getting the Cisco security portfolio together. VirusTotal was a bit of a proof of concept to demonstrate that it's possible. We're definitely looking at other third-party integrations. We have a whole team that does exactly that. But the majority of our engineering effort right now is bringing our own products into the fold.
Does this have a dependency on DNA Center? Do you also need a DNA Center
Not at
appliance?
all.
Oh, thank goodness.
I didn't say that. But no, those are completely separate right now.
So the user is identifying the questionable domains and then plugging them in, correct?
The user is doing an investigation.
Yes.
Based on some information that they received from the internal logs or some third-party source, Talos blog, it could be anything. But yes, they're deciding what to search for.
Okay, and then is Cisco on the back end, are you guys collecting the domains that everyone's researching and notifying other users who have Cisco Threat Response? Is there any community integration that way?
No. No, we're not harvesting what our users are searching for and
there
using
a-
that to
there a
crowdsource
plan
any kind of content.
Can you report it in any way? Like if because I'm basing off my threat intel experience with Splunk is so basically you can you build your intelligence and you can create projects. And is there a way that you can create a project in there and then report it?
Okay, so it's time for that part. Excellent.
Oh, am I going ahead again? Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. So we're going to do something here. I'm just going to take these things at random. I'm going to take this file. I'm going to add it to a new case.
Okay, case project, same thing.
Am I? I'm going to click on something. Go.
Let's get legal involved.
And here, let's take this file. Add this to the current case.
So who had the question about the API and the interface and how stable it was?
That's you.
That would be me.
And here we see the cases. So this little widget that was down in the right-hand corner, if I click that, it expands. And I can see all of the things that I added to this case. And I can take notes. Yeah. Look, notes, I'm typing. I can give it a name. Now this case has a URL that I can then reference and pass it around to my teammates. Shift change, I go on holiday, but somebody still needs to look into this thing. That's shareable within my organization. It can be picked up at any time by anybody else. Also, if I've decided the rest of this is irrelevant garbage to me and I don't need to know about it, it's a good way to trim it down. And so now if I investigate this case, I'm only going to see the 3 things, except that it timed out. Damn it. All right. If I were to investigate that on a not demo machine, it would show me those 3 items and not the rest of everything else that you see here.
Can you like assign it to people, like to investigate, like if you have different teams that?
It's not a ticketing system.
Can you integrate it with a ticketing system?
Over the API that's going to be, well, that's already made public, but it's going to be made more public soon, you could do something like that.
Yeah.
But there's currently no solid plans to integrate it with any third-party ticketing systems.
Do you have a first-party ticketing system?
No.
So basically, if you had a ticketing system, you would take that link,
Create a
you'd
ticket.
throw the link in there,
Yeah.
Okay.
and run it that way.
Yep.
And then that passes assignments back
Yeah.
and forth. It's not easy. Back to the integrations for a minute, and in terms of the user community, when you were mentioning Splunk earlier, it keyed off me how great that user community has been to build on things. Can you add integrations in? Is this extensible? So in other words, if I was always going out and doing the same 3 things in my SOC, could I pull one of my top guys off, write some quick API code, and add that action in?
Yes, the API is open. Anything that you can do in the UI is available via the API as well. And so you can code to your heart's content and be able to do any of this stuff in an automated fashion.
And the last thing I was going to ask regarding like reporting that, is there any like built-in like metrics tracking or build it like a bit? Basically, if it's successful, awesome. But how do I kind of show that it's successful? Like, is there any
Executive
reports?
summary report out to hand off to the exec?
That's like automated, and I can do it.
I'll say it this way. It's not on the roadmap, but it's on the radar.
Okay, fair enough.
It's one of the discussions that's being had about, as we concentrate primarily on building out support for the rest of the portfolio, what are the other things that we should also bring along the way, and that's one of them.
Am I able also to integrate third-party feeds and sources I have or open source tools that maybe the Security Operations Center already deployed?
Yes.
Because,
So earlier when I said that threat response doesn't actually store data, the one exception to that is that you can use the API to upload your own threat intelligence, and it gets stored in a system that's kind of adjacent to threat response. And you can access that system from within threat response. So if you want to upload your ITISEC feeds or FSISEC feeds, stuff that your own SOC has discovered, things from Bambanek or abuse.ch or whatever else you use, you can do that.
So you mean I can integrate it with the threat intelligence platform vendors
Oh no, I thought you were
not,
talking about the threat intelligence itself.
Yeah, no, I just trying to understand if is integration regarding the TAP platforms or just with the tools.
It would just be an export of the data that you have into the storage system that threat response uses for your threat intelligence.
Okay.
Another question I had was, does it? I realize this. Does it do any like normal, like look for any anomalies, like normal kind of? What am I trying to say?
Does it look for patterns? Does it look for deviations from those patterns?
Yeah. No.
That would be something that would be up to the endpoints that are integrated.
Okay.
Threat response doesn't do that natively.
Okay. Cool.
So is this threat response server center we're connecting into centrally a central aggregation domain kind of thing, or can you have disparate servers and other locations? I'm just trying to see how we
cloud-based.
scale it. Okay, it's all cloud-based.
Yeah, it's all cloud-based. We have 3 different data centers in different regions. We have North America, or the Americas. We have APJC, and we have Europe.
How do we feed it? How do we feed through collectors or something along those lines, the data that actually goes into it?
We don't.
I mean, it has information right now. How does the information get into it? From all my
API. So I asked it a question. I asked threat response a question, essentially. I just pasted in some information and said, hey, grab the observables out of this and look them up. So I gave it a block of text out of which it detected 22 things. It then went and asked all of my different sources that I've configured in my list of modules. Okay, there's my list of modules. And it went and asked each of these things about each of those 22 items and brought all that information back. And it's only storing it to show it to me. As soon as I close this investigation, it's gone. The casebook that I opened, it keeps what I had looked for but it doesn't keep the verdicts or the judgments or the relationships or any of that. The next time I load that casebook up, it's going to check again. It's going to ask again.
So as it's pulling in the data from your modules, is it pulling it in real time, or is it going to store that data for a long period of time for that longer historical view? Right?
It stores it for as long as you're using it.
So if you wanted to relook, you'd have to search it over again?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any plans to get any kind of retention in that? It might be something that you see, like you have a signature that pops in and it happened on Monday, and then 2 weeks later it pops up again. You might want to kind of see where that history and...
Okay, yes, you can do that via
a module?
snapshots. So I can take a snapshot of any investigation, and whereas a casebook, it's keeping the observables for which I was searching, and just storing them as a data set, and I can easily reload that and search again. A snapshot is just what it sounds like. It's a point in time, and this will stay here until I delete it.
So I usually really hate using this word, but is there any analytics tied behind this where you can start historically graphing things, or?
You're the
No.
analytics. It's all you.
Do you see this
I
as
have a bad
becoming
memory, so it does not need to be me.
integration platform to push the ticketing, like in API Center, you get all your data coming in here, you figure it out, and then you push it out to the teams that need to remediate it in a ServiceNow or Jira or whatever ticket?
So like I said, we have a team that's looking specifically at third-party integration opportunities with this platform, and that's one of the areas into which we're looking is ticketing systems and the like.
And I assume /hope connecting actually into this dashboard and being able to use this can be set up / is available with multi-factor authentication and other options like that?
Yes.
As opposed to just username and password?
Well, will be soon. So there's another presentation coming up later today that just think back to that question, and it'll make more sense. But yes, we are looking at multi-factor authentication. Over the APIs, the authentication is done a little bit differently with session tokens, essentially, that are time-based. But right now, you log in with a Cisco Security ID, which is something that's probably new to everybody because we just started in the process of rolling it out. But as we've grown our cloud security offerings, there's a number of different Cisco security products that you have to log into a cloud portal with a set of credentials. ThreatGrid had their own, AMP had their own, Threat Response had their own. We're bringing all that together into what we're calling a Cisco Security ID, a single credential that can get you into multiple cloud-based security products.
So I've got someone logs in the Threat Response. They run a bunch of reports. They create some cases. They run a bunch of the thought analytics. Can I audit what the people are doing during that time frame?
Not yet.
Okay, because I could have some, let's say I am a malicious actor. I get your credentials because I don't need two-factor at the moment. I get in there, I run a bunch of things. I ingest an ability that may look at legitimate data in a way to exploit this as a backdoor through all of your modules. Just saying, I'm trying to hack the hacking tool.
I'm going to
Or you use it to try to find threats that aren't currently protected against or something like that. I understand exactly where you're
I love that as well. Now you just open another door for me, so I like that.
All right,
So
guys.
what's on the intelligence tab? If we got insight, we got snapshots, what's the intelligence?
Intelligence is a way to just search. Like in the investigate window, you have to have observables, IP addresses, domains, file hashes, soon to come email addresses, subject lines, that kind of things. The investigate is just a way to look for any random string.
What kind of searches can I do? It says even too.
So I just want to know what's going on in the star.biz domain. Nothing at the moment. Okay, that was a bad choice. But this is what you can do. You can just search for arbitrary strings and pull up everything that is in the public intelligence sources. So here's a list of remote access Trojans. It's a direct link into the intelligence databases that are behind some of the modules. Let's look at the modules again for just a second. So AMP Global Intelligence is a name for what's essentially the Advanced Threat Solutions Threat Intelligence Database. It's composed of a number of different sources, both internal and external, that we collect together for use in the various products, and through Cisco Threat Response, you get your own access to that. Private AMP Global Intel is that thing I was talking about earlier, where you can upload your own threat intelligence to a storage facility that we provide. AMP File Reputation, even if you're not an AMP for Endpoints customer, if you're a customer of any of the products that get you access to Threat Response, This gives you the ability to search the AMP file reputation database for the reputation of any file, which we have seen, billions and billions of files. Talos Intelligence. Hopefully everybody knows who Talos is. It's Cisco's Advanced Threat Intelligence and Malware Research division. And they maintain a database of their own threat intelligence. This gets you access to that. And then, of course, we've got and these are default. These you get regardless of which product it is that you actually have. And then we've got AMP for Endpoints, Umbrella, and Threat Grid, which are the Cisco products that are currently integrated. And then not shown in this demo is the Virus Total module as well. Now, I've got just a few minutes left, so I want to show you one more thing before I give up the stage. This is a Talos blog article. So this is the Talos blog article about Olympic Destroyer. It's long. It's very interesting. It has a bunch of IOCs in it. Now, remember at the very beginning, I said that, a running joke about Cisco Threat Response is that it's our war on copy and paste. In the model that I just showed you, I copied a bunch of observables out of an article, and I just copied the whole article, and I pasted it into Threat Response. That's the one copy-paste that's left in this operation. So, we now have a browser extension. I hit that. It's searching the current contents of the browser, pulling out the observables, and immediately showing me the verdicts on those observables. One button, I immediately see all of the observables and their current verdicts. And with this drop-down menu, right here in the browser, I have all the capabilities that Cisco Threat Response offers me on each of these observable types. So here on this file hash, I can immediately add it to one of the 2 custom detections lists that I have set up without even having to go to Threat Response, without even having to go to AMP for Endpoints. It's right here in the browser for me at any minute. Now, when we were talking about integrations, and everybody was asking some very good questions, do you integrate with this, do you integrate with that? Does it have a web-based interface? Because if it does, you can take information out of it and immediately do all of the Cisco Threat Response functions on those items right from that tool's management page.
And what's the mechanism for this plugin to go and communicate back to the Threat Response Center, which would then have control over the AMP devices and other modules?
Right. It's an API client that talks to the Threat Response API, and then Threat Response in turn talks to all the different APIs.
Protected by certificates or standard credentials, or how do you feed the part that actually lets you log into that?
You create in Threat Response, you create what's called an AMP client ID, or sorry, a Cisco Threat Response client ID for API clients, and then you take the credentials that are generated. So it's not your credentials that you would use to log in. It's kind of like a sub account under your account, and you take those credentials and give it to the configuration of this browser plugin.
Cool.
I'm just about out of time. If anybody has a last-minute question, these are your last 2 minutes.
I'll take one final question. So this makes sense to me. I got a SOC. It does the same thing every day. It copies data from various tools, pastes them in other ones as investigations. So in this instance, we can copy it into one tool, run all the investigations, bring it into one console. That's fantastic. I can really see how that would save a lot of time. Now, what happens when it's in this tool and the SOC analyst goes, you know what, I now need to dig deeper. I need to look at historical information. You go AMP for Endpoint. Is there a click to go back and view that data in the regular tools?
Absolutely. Right here in this drop-down menu,
yes,
which is the same menu that's available from each and every observable in the interface itself, like in the relationships graph, this is the same menu. And you have file trajectory and AMP for endpoints on a file. So the items that are going to come down in this menu are dependent on what modules you have configured, how you've configured them, and what kind of object it is. So on a file object, you can look at file trajectory and AMP for endpoints. You can immediately see where has this file been throughout my network, which you can see in the CTR, in the threat response interface as well. But in file trajectory, you get the timeline of it much more clearly, and you can find out, okay, so this file was seen, it was downloaded from this website. The download was initiated by this process. You get a lot more detail. On a domain, you can pivot into Umbrella and get the very detailed, excellent Umbrella investigate information on that domain. We're not showing all of that in the threat response interface. So the short answer, yes. You can absolutely pivot from any of these items into other integrated systems, depending on the modules, that will give you much more detailed information.
Thank you.